MacGyver never fired a gun in 7 seasons, and the writers deliberately broke every dangerous formula so no viewer could copy it. Yet one of these 8 actors would later walk into a prosecutor's office and hand over the worst secret of her childhood. 2 of them are gone. Number 1 is the man who appears in almost every frame of all 139 episodes, and who says the price of that was his entire life. Richard Dean Anderson was born on January 23, 1950, in Minneapolis, the eldest of 4 sons of a teacher and an artist. Hockey was the plan, and that plan ended at 18, when he broke both arms 3 weeks apart playing for his school. After leaving Ohio University in his junior year, he rode a bicycle from Minnesota to Alaska, then spent several years handling whales in marine mammal shows and working the street as a mime and a juggler. He later called that stretch the happiest of his life. 611 episodes of General Hospital followed, playing Dr. Jeff Weber. Then, at 35, came the part that swallowed him whole. What drew him in was the absence of a weapon. Anderson has said he was intrigued by the idea of a television hero with an aversion to guns, and the writers built that refusal into the character's history, with a friend killed in an accidental shooting when MacGyver was 12. According to Anderson, the National Rifle Association responded by calling on Americans to boycott the show. 7 years of it nearly broke his body. He did his own stunts, and a fall into a hole compressed a disc in his back, which he worked through in pain for roughly a year and a half before surgery, with foot operations to follow. MacGyver, he said afterwards, was 7 years of being in virtually every frame that was shot and having absolutely no life at all. He has never married. His longest public relationship was with April Prose, from 1996 to 2003, and their daughter Lee was born on August 2, 1998. She turned 27 last August, and her father keeps her out of the press at her own request. When she was born, he called the baby his reason for living, and he meant it literally enough to step down from the lead of his next series to be at home. At 76, he lives in Malibu with his dogs and calls himself semi-retired. In May of this year, he flew to Metz in France and signed a full-scale replica built by a fan group named after his character. Chronic pain has not left him. In September of 2024, he canceled a trip to Australia, needing to recover from exhaustion and headaches that doctors were still investigating. MacGyver could get out of any locked room with a paperclip. Richard Dean Anderson got out of that show with a compressed disc, 2 operated feet, and pain he still manages, and he now spends his mornings warning strangers online that the man asking them for money is not him. Number 2 belongs to the person this show refused to abandon. Ibsen Dana Elcar was born on October 10, 1927, in Ferndale, Michigan, the son of an immigrant carpenter and butcher. He enlisted at 18 and served in the United States Navy at the end of the Second World War. Training under Sanford Meisner put him on Broadway in 1955, opposite Hume Crow Nin and Jessica Tandy, and off-Broadway into Pinter, Beckett, and Dylan Thomas. More than 150 screen credits followed across 50 years, including The Sting and All of Me, with regular work on Beretta and Ba Ba Black Sheep. Pete Thornton was the boss who was really the friend. He sent MacGyver into buildings and then worried like a father until he came back out, and Elcar played him rumpled, unglamorous, and entirely believable. Nobody else on that series could make a scene behind a desk feel like the emotional center of the hour. Then, in 1991, his sight started to go. Glaucoma. He told the producers he was going blind, expecting the conversation that usually follows. They wrote it into the show instead. Beginning with the 17th episode of Season 6, Pete Thornton develops glaucoma, and the storyline runs through the rest of that season and the whole of the final one. Elcar kept his job and his character, and afterwards played blind characters on Law & Order and on ER. A second life had been running underneath all of it. He founded the Los Angeles Actors Theater, and after moving to the small town of Santa Paula, he founded the Santa Paula Theater Center, which started in a church basement and grew into a real venue for the town. Blindness did not stop him running it. His personal life was long and complicated. 3 marriages, to Catherine Frances Mead from 1948, Peggy Romano from 1954, and Marianne Torrance from 1978, produced 4 children, his daughters Maureen, Nora, and Chandra, and his son Dane, along with a stepdaughter, Emily. The last years were spent with his companion, Thelma Garcia. On Monday, June 6, 2005, Dana Elcar died at Community Memorial Hospital in Ventura, California, of complications from pneumonia. He was 77. His family held a private service on the Friday morning, and at 2 that afternoon, the town he had given a theater to filled a mortuary on East Santa Paula Street to say goodbye. No cemetery was ever announced. Pete Thornton spent 7 years watching a younger man walk into rooms neither of them could see into. Dana Elcar lost his sight in the middle of that job, and the answer he got from the people who employed him was a rewrite instead of a goodbye. Number 3 had one of the best entrances in film history before this show ever called him. Bruce McGill was born on July 11, 1950, in San Antonio, Texas, to a father who sold real estate and insurance, and a mother who was an artist known as Squeaky. He took a degree in drama at the University of Texas at Austin and went straight into classical theater with a Shakespeare company and then repertory. Hamlet was the work. Paying the rent was the problem. Out of that desperation came Animal House in 1978, and the character of D-Day, who rides a motorcycle up a flight of stairs and drums the William Tell overture on his own windpipe. McGill took the job because he could not get another one. Jack Dalton arrived in 1986 and stayed for 19 separate appearances. Dalton was a bush pilot, a soldier of fortune and quite plainly a liar, an inveterate swindler who turned up every year or so with a scheme that was going to make everybody rich and instead almost got everybody killed. McGill played him with so much warmth that the audience forgave him at the same speed MacGyver did. What followed was the sort of career that never makes a magazine cover and never stops. He was the sheriff in My Cousin Vinny, made 3 films with Michael Mann, played the director of the Central Intelligence Agency for Oliver Stone, and Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War for Steven Spielberg, and spent 6 years as Detective Vince Corsac on Rizzo, Lee, and Isles. A Best Actor prize at the Pasadena International Film Festival came in 2019. Gloria Lee became his wife in 1994. At 76, he is still working in production on a new Scooby-Doo feature and still in contact with the man he spent 6 years lying to on camera. Jack Dalton deceived every person who ever trusted him. Bruce McGill has stayed married for 32 years and continuously employed for 48, which is the least Dalton-like life a man could possibly build. The next name on this list read a newspaper story about a dead teenager, recognized the man described in it, and walked into a prosecutor's office to give evidence against her own family. Number 4 is Penny Parker, and almost nobody who watched this show knows what she did in 2002. Teri Hatcher was born on December 8, 1964, in Palo Alto, California, to a nuclear physicist and a computer programmer at Lockheed Martin. She studied mathematics and engineering at De Anza College before she ever studied acting. MacGyver cast her in 6 episodes between 1986 and 1989. As an aspiring actress, the hero meets in an airport queue in Bulgaria and can never quite get rid of. Penny Parker was sunny, chaotic, and permanently 2 steps from disaster, and Hatcher committed to the silliness so completely that it worked. Everything got much bigger after that. Lois Lane for 4 years. Susan Mayer on Desperate Housewives for 8. A Golden Globe in 2005, 3 Screen Actors Guild Awards, an Emmy nomination, and by April of 2006 a reported $285,000 for every episode she shot. In the middle of all of that, on a visit to her parents, she picked up a newspaper. The story was about a Sunnyvale teenager named Sarah Van Cleem Putt, who had taken her own life in January of 2002. She had left a note, and in it she told whoever found it to go and ask a man she named only by his nickname. Hatcher knew the nickname. The man was Richard Hayes Stone, her uncle by marriage, and he had abused her from about the age of 5. That prosecution was falling apart. Their complainant was dead, and without her the charges were going nowhere. Hatcher contacted the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office and gave investigators a full statement about what Stone had done to her as a child, knowing that a statement in a criminal file does not stay private forever. The prosecutor, Chuck Gillingham, has said plainly that without her it would have been dismissed. On October 24, 2002, Stone pleaded guilty to molesting 2 young girls and was sentenced to 14 years. He never came out. In August of 2008, he died of colon cancer at a medical center in San Diego, aged 70, after 6 years inside a state prison at Blythe, California. Hatcher said nothing publicly for 4 more years. Then, in March of 2006, at the absolute peak of her fame, she told the whole story herself in Vanity Fair because she had decided it might be useful to somebody else. Her own life has had its wreckage. A first marriage to Marcus Lithold lasted barely a year, and a second, to the actor John Tenney, ran from 1994 to 2003 and produced her daughter Emerson Rose, who is grown now and turns up beside her on red carpets. At 61, she is still working. Penny Parker was written as a woman who could not keep herself out of trouble. Teri Hatcher walked into somebody else's trouble on purpose, handed a prosecutor the one thing that would cost her the most to say out loud, and a man went to prison for 14 years because she did. Tell me in the comments whether you knew that story before today, because most people who watched every episode of this series did not. Say what you think you would have done in her position. Number 5 played a contract killer for 5 years and was born while his own father was serving a prison sentence. Michael Des Barres arrived on January 24, 1948, in Hove, on the English South Coast, and he arrived with a title. He is the 26th Marquis de Barres, a line running back to the year 1214, when an ancestor pulled the King of France out of trouble at the Battle of Bouvines. That title was about all that was left. His own account of his beginnings is short and unsentimental. The father, he has said, was a marquis, but he was in prison when Michael was born, for embezzling money. His mother was 17, the 5th wife of that man, worked as a stripper, and was placed in a mental institution a month after the birth. Friends of his mother raised him, and the expensive schools he was sent to were resented so much he chose a working-class career in rock and roll as a kind of revolutionary act. At 19, he was already on screen, playing the schoolboy in sunglasses in Sir, with Love. Music took over after that, and his career became a strange sequence of arriving inside other people's famous bands. Then, in 1985, when Robert Palmer walked away from the power station, Des Barres took the microphone and sang the band's set at Live Aid. 2 years later, he turned up on MacGyver as Murdoch, the assassin who would not stay dead. Burned, crushed, dropped, and buried, he came back every season in a new disguise with the same theatrical contempt, and he remains the only villain from that show anyone can still name. Marriage to the writer Pamela Des Barres ran from 1977 to 1991, and their son Nicholas is a writer and a designer of video games. His own turning point came in June of 1981, when he got sober, and he has stayed that way ever since. At 78, he is on the radio every weekday, hosting his own program on Sirius XM's Underground Garage. An album of covers came out in October of 2024, and a new single in February of this year. Murdoch was a professional criminal who kept walking back out of his own grave. Michael Des Barres was born in a hospital while his father sat in a cell for embezzlement, and he has now been sober for 45 years, which is far longer than that father was ever present in his life. Number 6 was the one woman on this show who was never written as somebody in need of rescue. Elyssa Davalos was born on May 30, 1959, into the business. Her father was the actor Richard Davalos, who played Aaron Trask opposite James Dean in East of Eden. Elyssa herself was working on screen from 1973 through Disney Features and a run on How the West Was Won. Nikki Carpenter came into MacGyver in the 3rd season under a cloud of suspicion and stayed as an equal. She could do the job. Nobody wrote her to be carried out of a burning building, and Davalos played her dry and unimpressed, which is precisely why the friction with the lead worked at all. Away from the camera, she married the photographer Jeff Dunas at the start of the 1980s, and they separated in 1988. Their daughter Elyssa Davalos became an actress too, through the Chronicles of Riddick and 4 seasons of The Man in the High Castle. Then Elyssa simply stopped. Her working career is listed as running from 1973 to 2007, with one last screen appearance in 2013, and she has kept no public profile since. She is 67, Her father died on March 8, 2016, at a hospital in Burbank at 85. Nikki Carpenter never needed anybody to come and get her. Elyssa Davalos stands between a father who acted opposite James Dean and a daughter who works in streaming television, and she is the only one of the three who decided to walk away from all of it. Subscribe if you have made it this far, because the last two names are the heaviest on the list. One of them ended up in a New York courtroom, and the other died 3 months after this series did. Number 7 joined this show at 20 years old, with an Academy Award waiting 8 years down the road. Cuba Gooding Jr. was born on January 2, 1968, in the Bronx. His father was Cuba Gooding Sr., the lead voice of the soul group The Main Ingredient, and the family moved to Los Angeles in 1972 on the back of a hit record. 2 years after that, his father left them. Shirley Sullivan raised 4 children on her own. Her son attended 4 different high schools and broke into the industry as a breakdancer alongside Lionel Richie at the Los Angeles Olympic Games. This series used him across 1988, 89, and 90 as Billy Colton, the youngest of a family of bounty hunters. Cleveland Little played Frank. Richard Lawson played Jesse. Della Reese played their mother. The producers liked that family enough to give them an episode of their own in the final season, as a pilot for a spin-off that never happened. What came next was enormous. Boys in the Hood in 1991. Then Jerry Maguire, an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor at 28, and a line about money that the entire country repeated for a year. In 2016, he played O.J. Simpson in a series about the most-watched criminal trial in American history and was nominated for an Emmy. 3 years later, he was a defendant himself. On June 13, 2019, Gooding was booked on charges of forcible touching and third-degree sexual abuse over an incident at a bar in Times Square. That October brought an indictment on a further charge. On April 12, 2022, he pleaded guilty to forcibly touching a woman at a New York nightclub in 2018, telling the judge that he had kissed a waitress on the lips without her consent. His agreement with prosecutors carried no jail time. He was permitted to withdraw that plea and plead instead to the lesser violation of harassment, on condition that he continue counseling for 6 months. A civil case filed in 2020 was settled in 2023 without ever reaching a trial. The marriage had already ended. He wed his high school girlfriend Sarah Kapfer in 1994 and they had 3 children, Spencer, Mason, and Piper. She filed for legal separation in 2014, and he filed for divorce in January of 2017. Between 2020 and 2023, he did not work at all. At 58, he is rebuilding, living between Los Angeles and the Hamptons, and taking parts in independent thrillers shot in London and elsewhere. Billy Colton chased down people who had failed to appear in court. 3 decades later, Cuba Gooding Jr. stood in a courtroom in New York himself, and the actor who won an Academy Award for playing a man screaming to be noticed was finally noticed in the way he least wanted. Number 8 is the face in one of the most studied scenes in cinema, and hardly anybody can tell you his name. John Anderson was born on October 20, 1922, in Clayton, Illinois. He studied theater in Minnesota and Ohio, took a master's degree in drama at the University of Iowa, and served in the United States Coast Guard during the Second World War. What followed was one of the most prolific working lives in American television, more than 500 roles with almost no leads among them. In Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, he is California Charlie, the cheerful used car salesman who sells Marion Crane the car she is running away in, and the last kind face she meets before the Bates Motel. Patricia Kaysen married him in 1946, and he stayed working until the end. Harry Jackson, the grandfather, took him through 5 episodes spread across 6 seasons, and that old man was the explanation for the whole character. Written as a flinty Minnesotan, he had raised the boy, taught him to fix what other people threw out, and remained the only person permitted to tell the hero he was wrong. Audiences believed the history between those 2 men before either of them said a word. The show ended on May 21, 1992. 13 weeks later, on August 7th, John Anderson had a heart attack at his home in Sherman Oaks and died. He was 69 years old. There is no plot to visit. He belonged to the Neptune Society, and in keeping with that he was cremated, and his ashes were scattered at sea. Harry Jackson taught a boy how to repair the things everybody else had given up on. John Anderson spent 500 television roles being the face nobody could name, and when he went there was no headstone left behind, only water. 139 episodes, and the hero never once fired a gun. 2 of the 8 are gone. The paperclip outlived them both.